It's another week and another brand new episode here on the Granny Panty Podcast. I'm your host, RubyLynne. Before you go much further, be sure you hit that subscribe and tap that bell because you do not want to miss an episode. If you'd like to follow me, your host, you can go to rubylynne.info for all things Ruby. All right, this week's guest built a multi-million-dollar escort empire that catered to Wall Street elites, survived scandal, prison, and politics, and came out sharper than ever. She's been called the Manhattan Madam, but that's only part of the story. So help me welcome Kristin Davis. Kristen, I'm so excited to have you on the show. I've been following you for a while, so welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I find your social media post to not only be entertaining, but also some really awesome advice. And so, the stories that you've told through headlines and sound bites and soundtracks, but I want you to introduce yourself your way. Who is Kristin Davis?
Sure. My name is Kristin Davis. A lot of people know me by the Manhattan Madam. That's a moniker I got when I was arrested in connection with providing former governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer, with call girls. Most people don't know. Before that, I was vice president of a $5 billion hedge fund. I learned about the industry through the finance bros. Since my first arrest, I've been in politics for 16 years, primarily working in right-wing politics with a handful of Democrats. So I can speak on a variety of subjects.
Yes, you've been called everything from a criminal mastermind to a political insider.
I like criminal mastermind the best because that's what actually everyone in politics is. So it maybe strikes a little bit of fear in their heart so that they don't scam, grift, and manipulate. So for me, that's my favorite one.
I love that. I love that. You built your escort agency like a Fortune 500 company, and you talk a lot about that on your social media. What do you think the strategies were that made it so successful?
I think one was fear, right? First, I had a hedge fund background. So I'd been working in finance for 10 years, dealing with the operational processes for hedge funds. So, I had a really good business background, but, I wanted to scale quickly because I recognized that it was an illegal industry. So my whole goal was like, get it in and out as quickly as possible, make your money quickly. So I was always looking for ways to make more money. So, when we started in my apartment in Manhattan. I got fired from my hedge fund job for placing an ad on Craigslist looking for girls.
Oh,
And probably shouldn't have done that from work, but I was at work like 15 hours a day. So I just wanted to see, how do you, find girls? I watched the finance bros using services for years. So I thought, okay, well, how would I even open an agency? I don't know any girls. I don't know this world. I was fired the next day. I started immediately the next week in my apartment, which I converted in New York City. And, so there was like always a fear with me, like, how can I do this better? How can I, make more money quickly? How can I, and I approached my agency like you would, a Fortune 500, thinking, okay, this is our business problem. How can I solve that? For example, one of the main problems was always keeping up with the demand for women. And like, how could I, recruit better? How could I make it better for the girls so that they stay? So there were always these challenges that I was addressing like a business, not like, someone who, I think a lot of women work their way up, they start an agency, and then their mentality stays stuck in like working girl mentality, kind of like a Heidi Fleiss. I know Heidi well. She likes to think she made a lot of money, but she really didn't because she was partying it all away. She was not running a normal business. So I think there's, a vast difference.
Gotcha. And so you really got the idea then from seeing those execs using services like that.
Oh, yeah. I started in finance at 17 and they didn't know how old I was. I went to a job interview in the Bay. I had already graduated high school. I went to this job interview that a temp company placed me at, and they were like, they love you. So they had no idea how old I was. They hired me. And, maybe 3 months in, one of the traders was like, get me some girls. We're going to Vegas. And I'm like, huh? What does that mean? And he just looked at me like, are you dumb? And I'm sitting there like, I am dumb, but I don't want to admit I'm dumb. So, how do I handle this? And he said, I'm going to give you a phone number. You call him, you tell him what I said to you.
Yeah.
He'll walk you through the process. And
Wow.
I called the VIP host. The next thing you know, and I mean, this is, decades ago, and they spent $30,000 for the weekend on companionship. And so I was floored at the amount of money these guys spent and that they, invoiced the company and all this, so I really was introduced to it in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Rather than being in that, like, realm and then deciding to open, you really did approach it like a business.
I did. And these guys, they didn't look at it as like a demeaning thing to do. People have all their misconceptions about the sex industry, but they really did it when they made a lot of money. It was like, we're going to splurge, we're going to party, we're going to indulge. And so there was never any, negativity really. I never approached it. And so I also didn't ever set any price bottoms. I think when you work your way up, you have in mind what you think people will pay. But I saw these guys spending, I mean, huge amounts of money, but I also got to know them, their personalities, understand how much they would pay if incentivized, if given little nudges, little, understanding how to deal with these guys. So, it was an interesting time.
I guess. You've said it wasn't the crime that got you, it was who you were. And what did you mean by that?
My association to like Spitzer, it never dawned on me that my clients would be the ones that led to my downfall. I thought it would be like the amount of money or maybe girls getting caught or, I thought it would be something operationally about the business, but really, my downfall was that. And I had so many high profile clients. And over the years, I've watched them make headlines. I've watched them get arrested. I've watched them do a lot of bad stuff, good stuff. And I've just thought to myself, man, I really had no idea when you're dealing with this caliber of person, the liabilities that it is to you.
Yeah. Oh, because they're under such a microscope.
Right. Right. And then Elliot Spitzer, like I knew there were wire transfers. He used us as attorney general. I met him. And it never even dawned on me, like sitting in he first used our service in that first apartment I had. Came into the building. I had to sit there and talk to him because the girl he was seeing was running late. And my phone booker said, listen, he doesn't want to wait out in front because um, his father developed this building. And so he's going to be recognized. And, he walked in. I recognized him just vaguely, like, I know this guy. Where do I? And eventually it dawned on me, but it never crossed my mind at that moment. Like, oh man, you got to think of ways to protect yourself. Never.
Right. Right. I mean, there's lots of things. After you got out of prison, you ended up working in politics. And so advising some of the biggest and most controversial names out there. How did that even happen? How did you get pulled into that?
You know, uh, After I got out of solitary in Rikers, I did a radio show with Roger Stone. It was a panel on Spitzer, and I met him, and he lobbied me to run for office. And I thought, I have no desire to run for office. Um, and then Geraldo, his brother Craig, called me and they wanted me to go on his show on Fox. And they said, a woman's been killed working off of Craigslist. And we know you used to use Craigslist. Can you come on the show? And I went on the show. And in the green room, I started Googling what happened because it was a last minute booking. I didn't have time. And I Googled her, and her name was Jalissa Brisman, and she used to work for me. And I was horribly upset. I almost did the whole interview in tears. And I just thought to myself, the man got caught with dozens of trophies from victims. None of those victims felt comfortable calling the police because they were afraid that they were going to get arrested. And now, I've lost all my money. I've
Yeah.
had all my money taken from the state of New York, and I'm put in this position where I have some notoriety. Maybe I can do something good with it. I
Mhm.
had dinner with Roger again. He'd been lobbying me, and I said, I just want to find out, like, how could I lobby for decriminalization? And he's like, I told you, run for office.
Right.
And that was the start of it. Um, you know, I ran for governor of New York, and then again for another office, New York City comptroller. And I had made so many connections, and you know, I just ended up starting a PR firm in politics from all the people that I met, reporters I dealt with, and who better to deal with your scandal than someone who's lived it?
Right. Right. And so, what are you doing present day? Are you
I
still
still do
do?
PR.
Yep.
I do unlike most publicists, what I do is more like media strategy. So most people you go to, you bring them your idea and you want to be booked. What I do is more complicated. Is that you bring me your problem and or your product, but mostly problems, and I figure out a way to use the media to push out your messaging. So that way, we we either reinvent you, we deal with bad press. So I don't necessarily promote a whole lot of like books and products. It's more like people who have, bigger objectives, and we need to use the media to build some momentum to get those objectives met.
And are your clients businesses or individuals?
Both.
Both. Okay.
I represented Roger Stone for 14 years. I worked with Giuliani and Flynn and Bobby Kennedy and all of these big, big names, on different projects. So I've done a lot of political campaigns. I've probably done 40 or 50 political campaigns, a few residential races. Um, yeah, so, I've built up a specialized skill set. And most people, it's helped me because of my background. Most of the reporters I know because they've covered my own story.
Mhm.
So, you know, the Chris Cuomos of the world and all these people, those people were still reporters when I made news. Chris Cuomo was the man on the street for ABC, I think. It was ABC or CBS. And he was outside of my courtroom, all of my court dates. So like I got to meet all of these people, and they know me, they know my story, and so they take my calls, whereas a lot of people who do PR, they just ignore you. They still ignore me. The same people who have lunch with me one day might ignore me the next day, but eventually they'll pick up the phone.
It's so funny. It reminds me of this. It's not who you know, or let's see, it's not who you know, it's who you blow. And I just really think
That's probably very accurate. It's the same type of thing.
you've said elites fear women like you. That was your quote. And it's not about sex. What is it really about?
Yeah. I think and I've learned this both through the agency and by working in politics. There's most definitely an us versus them. And it's not all. I want to say that because I really know like dozens of billionaires,
Mhm.
and they don't all have the same power, right? They
Mhm.
don't all have, because they're not all using their money to create organizations to get power, right? That's how the billionaires and the elite become elite, right? Is like a Bill Gates or a Bezos or somebody creates, open society, and then they use that to fund their objectives, and they keep getting more and more power. Not every billionaire or every person with a lot of money does that. Some people just don't care. They want to go vacation and do charitable things. But the ones that do, there's a lot that fear the fact that we know their game, right? It's not about sex because, a lot of them are just so kinky and strange. More money, more fetishes, from my experience. But they're, when you really have seen the ways in which they manipulate you and the ways in which um, they try to grab power, that's what I think, makes us dangerous, is when we see it. And I have a lot of firsthand experience with it. I see people, you know, online bros with microphones, and everybody's got an opinion, but most of their opinion is BS. It's not even based on any facts or real world experience. And I think to myself, like, you really have no idea. You're completely off base. You've never worked a political campaign. So or with a nonprofit or a PAC, there's lots of shady political things that go on.
Yeah. I mean, you led me right into my next question. Is that you've seen men at their most powerful and their most vulnerable. Um, what's the real psychology of power?
That's a good one. You know, um, I once asked Roger Stone, what would you rather have, money or power? And he said, well, what would you rather have? And I said, money.
Money. I just was
I want
thinking,
the money. I want to go buy myself, you know, an island where I can be left alone, not an Epstein island, just my own island where I can be
right.
left alone and maybe have a harem of hot men waiting on me hand and foot.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But and he was like, what? I definitely want the power. And, so I think that, there are people out there that really understand that power is leverage, and and their whole, I'm not saying this actually about Roger. I'm now generalizing. So this isn't about Roger, but there are people, out there whose entire persona is built off of lies and falsities created to make you angry, make you feel something, mostly fear-based, because now they have that power. That's really the psychology of power, is to manipulate your emotions, mostly based off of fear and anger, outrage, and then find a way to monetize that. And that's,
Mhm.
the world we're living in right now.
I was just going to say, I think I know what you're talking about.
Right, because they make you, and we're so polarized now, where the Republicans think the Democrats are baby killing non-Christians when that's not true, and then they think that Republicans are, want everyone to have a gun, and they don't care if kids are, shot in mass shooting. I mean, the whole thing is purposely meant to dehumanize us towards each other, so that we give up more control, more control, more control, and then we end up having no power.
Mhm. Yeah. It's a crazy world we live in. I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime, but
Me either, and I can tell you it's 100% intentional. I've worked with so many influencers, because if not only have I represented these high profile people, right? And everybody wanted to be around these people. So the amount of influencers I meet, because they're coming to us for endorsements, because they want clout, because they want a grift. I mean, it's the long line list of things they want. But also working with some of them in other projects, or working with them in regards to these people. I've worked with so many of them, and 80% of them are disingenuous. 80% of them and know what they're doing. They are purposely lying about things to make you angry, because they know when you're angry that they can present, like, right, it's any sales, it's like any sales tactic, right? You have to hit a pain point, and you have to give people a problem that only you or your product can solve. So they're giving you a problem: hate this person, hate that person, they're evil, they're this, they're that. I can solve it. You have to give me money, but I can solve it. And they do it intentionally. It's really disgusting towards me, to me, to see.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
don't have the capacity to call all of them out because I never created content up until the last year. So I
Yeah.
never built my own platform.
Yeah. And so, one question too, because I love your confidence, I love your honesty. Um, that's why I enjoy your social media so much, and your sass, you know, confidence. I love that. Uh, for women listening, specifically to this, who are going to tune in and want to own their confidence, Kristen, what's your advice for them to do that unapologetically?
My advice, I like to equate everything towards money and time, right? Because it's something that I have experience in, and it's something that I know men understand, So, but women don't, right? We'll waste years on someone who's actually doing nothing for us. So if you think of yourself, almost like a business, I've said once, I think on social media, like most of you are dating people you would never give jobs to. If they came with their dating resume, if you were their employer, you'd be like, "Oh hell no, this person isn't on time, they're not consistent, they're going to cost me money, they need to go." But we as women, because we don't have confidence, will accept so much less than what we deserve. So my advice to women in general is like, one, think about your time. Are you investing your time into someone that it's going to have a payoff, a positive payoff to your life? Is it benefiting you in any way? And a lot of times when you think about it, like, no, I mean, personally, I'm a fan of a coffee date. I, people are not fans of coffee dates, and because they think it's low value, it's low investment. And to me, I say, well, coffee date, I'm going to give you 20 minutes. And I'm really probably not going to do all of this for a coffee date. I'm going to come, as is, whatever I'm doing for the day. So, it's an hour with my drive. Okay. But if I'm going out to dinner with you, I'm wasting 2 hours on dinner and maybe another hour and a half getting ready. And then I have a kid. I have to drop my kid off. There's all these issues. So now we're looking at 1 hour versus 4 hour. And I don't have 4 hours to invest. It's me investing my valuable time into you. And chances are I don't even know you. Like I don't know you well enough. If I said, okay, you know what? I charge $1,000 an hour. You can have a coffee date for 1,000 or dinner for 4,000. I'm going to go with the coffee date, and especially, oh my gosh, I used to live in Manhattan for years. When I had a kid, I would calculate, what does it cost me to go on this date? Okay, my babysitter in Manhattan was like $40 an hour. So now you're looking at 160. I had to pay for her car service. So now we're at like 240. I had to pay for my cabs back and forth, depending on where. So I'm looking at like 320 just to go on a date. No one's taking me on a meal that's $320 for the first date in Manhattan. So every time I would date in Manhattan, it would be a financial loss to me. And I just thought to myself, this is no, I don't like you well enough. I used to make people meet me for walks. People think that's low value. I'd be like, no, I'm already going on a walk. This is what I can do. And I'll tell you what, don't let your low confidence tell you that's a low value date, because it is what you determine it is. And I would tell those guys, I don't have time. You get what I can give you. And they would be chasing me because they just thought, oh my gosh, this girl is busy. And like, I really got to be, you know, on par to get more time. And most of the times I didn't want to go on a second date with them. So I'm happy I saved my time.
Yeah, I mean, I think also it's the confidence of having your own boundaries and not wavering from that. And my experiences after two divorces, I was like, oh my God, why do I keep picking the same kind of guy? I made a checklist. I think Women need to not think they can fix things, you know.
Did you see the red flags in the beginning?
Yeah, yep, exactly. And it's like, okay, I'm, 40 years old, something, 40 something. I'm going to be making a checklist now. And if they don't meet even one box, you're right. Don't put in that effort.
It's because we overlook the red flags
That's
because
right. That's right.
we think that they'll get better and they don't.
Yep. So you've been featured on a lot of shows, from The View to Fox News. I saw your segment on hustlers, gamblers, and crooks. That was fun. I loved it. How does the version of your story differ from what we see, the media spin it or what's been said?
That's a good one. I think that the media, they like to sensationalize this world. I mean, it's interesting. I certainly made a lot of money and you know, I lived a glamorous lifestyle. Um, but I think what the people don't see is like the complete and utter devastation that I went through by my own choosing. These were all my choices to create this agency and do these things. But they didn't see like the loss of all my money, the betrayals from boyfriends who cooperated against me, rebuilding my life after prison, literally with no money, $60 in my name, walking the streets of Manhattan, trying to figure out what I would do with my life. Like, I certainly have created my own hardships because of my choices. You know, and that always gets overlooked because the glamour is so intriguing. And it is intriguing. And I did run an agency that I loved, that I had fun with, that made me a ton of money, and I lived a great life. But I also paid for it.
Right.
And so, I feel like people should see the other side of that and like how much I struggled. And it was not easy. It took me years to rebuild my life. People think, oh, look at you now. You look great, la da da da, and you look like you have money. And I'm like, yeah, but you understand it took me like 6 or 7 years. The rebuild did not happen instantaneously or overnight. It was, and I humbled myself to work jobs that maybe most people wouldn't work, because I understood I needed to go in steps of rebuilding. It's not like you just come out and you're like, hey, here I am, give me jobs. Oh my gosh, back in the beginning, no one would give me a job. It was
Right.
horribly rough and upsetting.
But you have confidence and you persevered, and I mean,
So,
your
you know what they
attitude is
said to
no
me in
one's gonna
prison?
get you
In
down.
prison, an officer said, Miss Davis, you are so tenacious, but that's not a good trait to have here in prison. And I was like, I'm gonna be, and because I wanted to get in a class in prison, and I kept lobbying this guy, and prison works so slow. But if I didn't get in this class by a certain date, I wouldn't be able to do it at all.
Right.
And I was at his office every day, and the officer was like, "You are so tenacious, but that is not an attribute here in prison." And I just said, "I'll see you again tomorrow. I will be here again tomorrow because I really want to be in this class." And he's like, "Please don't. Please don't." And I was like, "See you tomorrow." And I showed up every day until he did what I needed him to do. And it took like
That's
2
right.
weeks.
That's right. So your TikTok has blown up. Kind of one of my last questions. Your TikTok's blown up. I love it. That's where I follow you. What kind of trade secrets or truth that you've shared is really resonating with your viewers? Like what is it that they're really grabbing onto?
When I started my TikTok, I never made content before. I had no idea what to put out. And I was talking about, the 304 life because that's a niche in TikTok.
Right.
And I sort of stumbled upon dating advice.
Mm.
And that seems to be like the one that resonates the most. And I just realized that it's sad to me that so many women have had bad experiences with men. And what can I do to help them stop settling for less? Because that's really you know, in my opinion, I have been the one to break my own heart. It is me. All of my heartbreak I can attribute to my bad choices and overlooking red flags, betraying my own self-worth.
Mhm.
And so I take responsibility for that. And I feel like, I hope to impress that upon other women. Like, once you really, people don't tell you what self-love is.
Right.
They say, "Oh, you don't love yourself." What does that mean? Because my parents didn't love me, I didn't have any support, all these things. I don't actually know what that means. And for me, it really means like every time you see a red flag, you say no to that red flag. Every time something doesn't feel right, you don't give second chances. You acknowledge them as they come, and each step that you take and you do that is self-love, because eventually your psyche is going to say, "You're right, we do deserve better. Thank you for not giving that person 10 chances. Thank you for all these things." And eventually you get better. So that's sort of my whole goal with my TikTok, and the dating advice. I talk a little bit about politics, but that's a really hateful world to jump into. And I get, my Epstein posts my one Epstein post on both platforms has done 6 million views. But the amount of hate that I also get
Oh, yeah.
is
Yeah.
astronomical. So I just don't put out as much
Mhm.
political content, even though, like, I have firsthand experience with all of these influencers and these organizations, turning points of the world. I've been
Mhm.
to all these events, but I just don't, I don't need that draining kind of
Oh,
behavior.
no. Oh my god, keyboard warriors. Yeah, you gotta have a thick skin to even be on social media, let me tell you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's rough. I don't understand why people have to be so abusive.
I don't either. There's a lot of unhappy people out there, but all right, as we close out, thank you so much for being here. Tell everyone where to find you if they're not already following you.
You can find me on TikTok or Instagram under @ManhattanMadam.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I've just loved meeting you and can't wait to meet you in person at some point.
Oh, that would be great.
Thanks, Kristen.